This scammer made my 80-years-old mom cry. Big mistake. You know that feeling when you're sitting in a courtroom in The Hague, watching some more criminal finally get what's coming to him, and instead of satisfaction, all you feel is empty? That was me 3 months ago. Colonel Daniel Denials. 15 years of prosecuting the worst humanity has to offer. Genocides, mass graves, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing about international justice. It's like performing surgery with oven mitts on. Everything takes forever. By the time you get your verdict, the victims are either dead or have moved on with their lives. The monster in the dock? He's just some old guy in a suit who doesn't even look dangerous anymore. I was sitting in my apartment in Amsterdam, staring at a stack of case files thick enough to stop a bullet, when my phone rang. Mom's number. It was 3 a.m. in Ohio. My mother, Eleanor Denials, is 80 years old and tougher than a $2 steak. She survived raising 3 boys while my father was deployed, buried him with full military honors when I was 25, and never once complained about any of it. So when I heard her voice crack on that call, something inside me shifted. The prosecutor in me sat up straight. The son in me wanted to punch through the wall. She told me about Vince the contractor, Vince the charmer, Vince who showed up at her door with a business card and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. He noticed her roof needed work, which it did. Fair enough. But then he started talking about my father. Said he'd served under General Denials in the 101st Airborne. Said my dad saved his life in Desert Storm. Mom invited him in for coffee. Of course she did. They sat at the kitchen table where I used to eat Lucky Charms before school. He looked at all the photos on the wall. Me in my dress blues, my brothers at their college graduations, Dad receiving his Bronze Star. Vince had stories for everything. Knew just enough details to sound legitimate. Probably did his homework on Facebook or something. These guys always do. By the time he left, Mom had written him a check for $25,000. Full payment up front for a complete roof replacement. She was so proud, telling me how she was helping one of Dad's men. The work started fine. A crew showed up, made a lot of noise, put up some tarps. Then they disappeared. When Mom called Vince, he had excuses. Weather delays. Supply chain issues. His mother was sick. Classic stuff. Mom believed every word because that's who she is. She sees the good in people. It's her superpower and her kryptonite all rolled into one. 6 weeks later, during the first real storm of the season, water started pouring through the ceiling. Not dripping, pouring. Like someone turned on a faucet in the attic. The crew had torn off sections of the old roof and just left them open, covered with nothing but thin plastic sheeting that wouldn't keep out a light breeze, let alone an Ohio thunderstorm. Mom tried to say what she could, but you can't fight physics. Water finds its way. It destroyed the guest bedroom, soaked through to the study below. But here's what really got me. It destroyed Dad's things. His handwritten journals from Vietnam and Desert Storm. His margin notes in his favorite history books. 30 years of letters he wrote to Mom from various bases around the world. First editions of military history texts he'd collected since West Point. Gone. All of it. Turned to pulp. When she told me about the books, I couldn't speak for a full minute. Those weren't just objects. They were artifacts. Evidence of a life lived in service. My father's thoughts, his wisdom, his terrible handwriting that only Mom could decipher, all erased because some lowlife wanted a quick score. Mom tried to handle it herself at first. Called Vince dozens of times. Left messages. Even drove to his supposed office address, which turned out to be a UPS store with a mailbox rental. She filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. Might as well have thrown a marshmallow at a tank. Then she said something that hit me like a sledgehammer. She said she felt stupid. My mother, who managed a household through 3 deployments, who learned enough about cars to fix her own transmission in 1987 because she couldn't afford a mechanic, who faced down a school board to get better resources for special needs kids. This woman felt stupid. That's when I knew I was coming home. I landed in Columbus on a Tuesday. Rental car to Westerville. The whole drive, I kept thinking about something Dad used to say. Some battles choose you, son. But the ones you choose yourself, those are the ones that define you. Walking up to Mom's house, I could see the blue tarps on the roof flapping in the wind like surrender flags. Inside was worse. Buckets everywhere. The smell of mildew creeping through the walls. Mom had moved most of the furniture to the center of rooms, away from the water damage. It looked like she was under siege in her own home. She hugged me at the door, and I felt how much weight she'd lost. Stress does that. Betrayal does that. When someone takes advantage of your trust, it eats at you from the inside. I've seen it in war crimes victims. Never thought I'd see it in my own mother. We sat in the kitchen, the one room still fully intact, and she showed me everything. The contract Vince had her sign, full of legal gibberish designed to confuse. The canceled check, endorsed to some LLC that probably existed for about 5 minutes. Photos she'd taken of the damage. The few books she'd managed to save, warped and stained, but still readable if you were careful. Then she pulled out a folder marked Research. My mother, bless her heart, had turned into a detective. She'd found other complaints online. 7 other families in Central Ohio, all with similar stories. All elderly. All paid up front. All left with damaged homes and empty promises. She printed everything out, highlighted the important parts, made a timeline. Looking at her work, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not the cold, calculated anger of a prosecutor building a case. This was different. This was personal. This was a kind of anger that burns clean and bright and doesn't go out until things are made right. Mom was watching my face. She knew that look. She'd seen it on Dad when someone messed with his soldiers. She'd seen it on me when I was 17, and some kid was bullying my younger brother. It's a denial's look, the one that says someone just made a very, very big mistake. She started to say something about how maybe we should just let it go, how $25,000 wasn't worth me taking time for my important work. I stopped her right there, took her hands in mine. They felt so small, so fragile. These hands that had held our family together through everything. I told her about my last case in Hague, some warlord who'd terrorized villages for years. We got him on 17 counts. He'll die in prison. But you know what? It didn't bring back the dead, didn't rebuild the villages. Justice was served, but it was hollow, abstract, a victory on paper that meant nothing to the people who suffered. This, though, this was different. This was a crime I could actually do something about, a wrong I could make right, not in 5 years after appeals and procedures, but now. I looked at Mom and made her a promise, not as Colonel Denials, prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, not as someone with fancy degrees and an impressive resume, just as her son. I promised her that Vince would pay back every penny, that her roof would be fixed properly, and that he would never, ever do this to another family. She squeezed my hands and nodded. Then she said something that would have made Dad proud. Give him hell, Danny. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the boxes Mom had moved up there to keep them dry. I opened my laptop and started making calls. Army buddies, law school connections, people who owed me favors, people who just hated seeing good folks get screwed. By midnight, I had a plan. Not a legal strategy. That would come later. This was something else. Something that would teach Vince the last lesson he'd ever need about messing with military families. I looked out the window at the street where I grew up. Quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people still wave at their neighbors and bring casseroles when someone's sick. The kind of place where taking advantage of an elderly widow is about the lowest thing you can do. Vince thought he'd pulled off a simple scam. He was wrong. He'd just started a war. The next morning came too fast. I woke up in my childhood bed with a crick in my neck and a plan that seemed a lot less brilliant in daylight. First stop, Westerville Police Department. I wore my best suit, brought my prosecutor credentials, even printed out Mom's documentation in a neat binder with tabs. Professional, organized, the whole 9 yards. The desk sergeant looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I explained the situation, showed him the evidence, mentioned the other victims Mom had found online. He listened, nodded, even took some notes. Then he leaned back in his chair. It creaked like it was older than both of U.S. combined, and delivered the verdict. Civil matter. Take it to small claims court. Have a nice day. I stood there for a moment, processing. In The Hague, when I walked into a police station, people jumped. Here in Ohio, I was just another guy with a complaint about a contractor. The sergeant was already looking past me to the next person in line, some teenager who'd lost his bike. Walking back to my rental car, I laughed. Actually laughed. Here I was, a guy who got Interpol to issue red notices, who coordinated raids across 3 continents, and I couldn't get a suburban cop to care about $25,000 stolen from an elderly woman. That was lesson number 1. The system wasn't built for this. It was built for stolen bikes and speeding tickets, and maybe the occasional bar fight, not for the slow, careful robbery of senior citizens by men with clipboards and business cards. Fine, I'd fought without backup before. I spent the next 3 days becoming a detective, not the cool kind you see on TV, the boring kind who sits in coffee shops with a laptop, scrolling through Facebook groups and Better Business Bureau complaints, the kind who calls strangers and asks awkward questions, the kind who drives around suburbs taking pictures of houses like some sort of real estate stalker. Mom's research had identified 7 other families. I found 12 more, 19 households in total, spread across 3 counties. All the victims were over 70. All had military connections, either veterans or spouses. All had paid up front. The amounts varied, $15,000 here, $30,000 there, but the pattern was consistent. Vince had a type. I started making house calls. The first was Mrs. Chun in Dublin. Her husband had served in Korea. Vince got her for $18,000. She offered me tea and cookies while showing me the water damage in her basement. Her hands shook when she handed me the photos. Not from age, from anger. But when I suggested we work together, she shut down. Lawyers cost money. Courts take time. She was 83. How much time did she think she had left to waste in legal battles? Mr. Rodriguez in Hilliard was next. Former Marine, built like he could still bench press a small car despite being 75. Vince had taken him for $22,000 and left his garage half demolished. Rodriguez wanted to find Vince all right. Wanted to introduce him to what he called Louisville justice, apparently a reference to baseball bats, not Kentucky law. I had to talk him down from that plan. We needed Vince functional, and not in traction. But it was Mr. Henderson who really got to me. Vietnam vet, Purple Heart, living alone in a house that had seen better decades. Vince had promised him a new deck, took $12,000, and delivered nothing but excuses. Henderson didn't even seem angry anymore, just tired. We sat on his existing deck, the one with boards so rotten you had to watch where you stepped. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said guys like Vince were vampires. Not the Hollywood kind. The real kind. They feed on trust. And once that trust is gone, it doesn't come back. You just go through life a little emptier, a little more suspicious of everyone. Then he looked at me with eyes that had seen too much and said the words that almost made me give up. Nothing you do will make any difference. Vince will find new victims. The law won't touch him. And even if you get your money back, the damage is already done. Your mother will never trust a stranger again. I sat there, listening to the wood creak under us, and realized he was right about everything, except one thing. My father used to say that the difference between a good soldier and a great one wasn't courage or skill. It was the ability to turn disadvantage into opportunity, to make the enemy's strength their weakness. Vince's strength was that he was too small for the system to care about, a petty criminal flying under the radar, but that also meant he'd never faced organized opposition. I spent the next week building my army. Not Rodriguez with his Louisville slugger fantasies, not Mrs. Chun with her resignation, but the others, the ones who still had fight in them. Mrs. Patterson, whose husband had landed at Normandy and who still had his pistol in a lockbox. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, retired Air Force, who documented everything with military precision. The Nguyen family, whose grandfather fought alongside Americans and who understood about honor and face. Getting them to work together was like herding cats. Suspicious, angry, disappointed cats. But I had one advantage. I wasn't asking them to trust me. I was asking them to trust each other. Veterans and military families understand unit cohesion. They understand that you don't leave anyone behind. We met at Mom's house on a Saturday. 12 households represented. I made coffee. Mom made sandwiches. It looked like the world's most depressing book club. But as they started sharing stories, something shifted. They weren't alone anymore. They weren't crazy or stupid or naive. They were victims of the same predator. Mrs. Williams had kept recordings of her phone calls with Vince. Illegal in some states, but Ohio's a one-party consent state. Thank God for small favors. The Nguyen's had photographs of the shoddy work he'd actually done before disappearing. Rodriguez had found Vince's actual home address, not the UPS store, but where he really lived. A McMansion in New Albany. Apparently, scamming seniors paid well. Henderson showed up late, moving slow with his cane. I thought he wouldn't come at all. But he sat down, looked around the room, and said 5 words that changed everything. "So we fight back now?" The room went quiet. Then Mrs. Patterson, all 4'11" of her, stood up and said what we were all thinking. "Damn right we do." I laid out what we knew. Vince had taken over $300,000 from just the people in this room. He was still operating, still placing ads, still hunting for new victims. The police wouldn't help. The courts would take years. But we had something Vince didn't know about. We had each other. And we had a plan. I pulled out my laptop, connected it to Mom's TV. Took me 3 tries. Those cables are confusing. And showed them what I found. Vince's patterns. His hunting grounds. The fake company names he cycled through. The way he always picked veterans or their spouses. The way he always demanded cash or check. Never credit cards that could be disputed. Rodriguez interrupted to ask if we were going to war. I told him yes, but not the kind he was thinking. This would be psychological warfare, information warfare, the kind where we use Vince's own tactics against him. That's when I told him about Phase 2, about how we were going to set a trap, about how we needed someone Vince had never seen before, someone who could play the perfect victim. Henderson leaned forward, interested for the first time, asked what kind of person would be perfect for this. I told him, male, late 60s or early 70s military background, recently widowed or divorced, new to the area, and wealthy enough to be worth Vince's time. Mrs. Williams asked where we'd find someone like that. That's when I unveiled Phase 2 of the plan. My buddy Dave from Fort Bragg. Dave was perfect for this. 6'3", silver hair, looks like he could buy and sell you twice before breakfast. More importantly, he could act. Did community theater in Fayetteville. Shakespeare and stuff. Man could cry on cue. When I called him, he didn't even hesitate. Just asked when and where. That's the thing about real friends. They don't need explanations. They just show up. We spent 2 days building Dave's cover story. Mr. Peterson, recently widowed, just moved to Ohio to be closer to his grandkids. Wife had always handled the house stuff. Lost without her. Looking to renovate his new place. Make it feel like home again. We even created a fake Facebook profile. Populated it with family photos Dave had from his actual life. Just changed the names and locations. The expensive part was renting him a house in Upper Arlington. $3,000 for 2 weeks. But you can't catch fish without the right props. We picked Upper Arlington specifically, wealthy area. The kind of place where a $47,000 renovation wouldn't raise eyebrows. Dave made contact through the same Facebook ad that had caught Mom. Vince responded within hours. Of course he did. Dave had mentioned in his message that he was looking for multiple renovations, possibly a complete home makeover. To a predator like Vince, that's blood in the water. They met at a Panera Bread. I was 3 tables away with a laptop, pretending to work while recording everything on my phone. Vince was smoother than I expected. Good-looking guy, mid-40s, with a kind of smile that made you want to trust him. He had props. A tablet with photos of beautiful work he'd probably pulled off the internet, references from satisfied customers who I'd bet didn't exist, and a veteran's discount that he made sound like a personal favor. Dave played it perfectly, mentioned his service, His dead wife who'd always handled these things. How lost he felt dealing with contractors. He was serving himself up on a silver platter. Vulnerable, wealthy, and alone. The conversation went exactly as we'd rehearsed. Dave asked about other jobs in the area, mentioned he'd driven around, and noticed some tarped roofs. The way Vince's face changed for just a second, a flash of something cold, before the smile came back. He laughed it off, blamed it on another contractor, guy named Smith who did shoddy work. Actually had the nerve to say he'd been called in to fix Smith's mistakes several times. Then came the moment that almost blew everything. They were discussing the scope of work when Dave slipped. Started to say something about roof damage like my mother's, caught himself, but not quite fast enough. I saw Vince's eyes narrow. Just for a moment, calculating. My heart stopped. 3 weeks of planning about to go down the drain because Dave mentioned the wrong thing. But Dave, God bless him, covered beautifully. Laughed about his senior moments. Said his daughter had been after him about his memory. Maybe he needed to start writing things down. Turned it into this whole bit about getting old, losing his wife, feeling overwhelmed. Vince relaxed. Even reached over and patted Dave's hand. Sympathetic. Understanding. The predator comforting his prey. The next day, Vince showed up at Dave's rental right on time. Nice truck with magnetic signs. Easy to remove when he needed to disappear. We had the whole place wired. Nothing fancy or legal. Just nanny cams and recording devices in the main rooms. Ohio's a one-party consent state. We were covered. Vince walked through the house with Dave, pointing out problems that didn't exist. The kitchen could use updating. The bathroom was practically falling apart. That foundation crack could cause serious issues down the line. Dave played overwhelmed. Said he didn't know where to start. Vince saw his opening. They sat at the kitchen table. Vince pulled out his tablet. Started showing photos of beautiful kitchens, stunning bathrooms, perfect roofs. Then came the numbers. Big numbers. But don't worry. He could work with Dave's budget. They could start with the essential stuff. And here's where it got good. Vince mentioned that elderly client preferred to pay up front. Easier for bookkeeping. Plus, 10% discount for cash. Dave asked about references. Maybe talk to some other clients? Vince got this concerned look. Said he had to respect his client's privacy. Elderly folks living alone, security issues, you understand. But he could show testimonials. That's when Dave went for the kill. Started talking about scammers targeting seniors. Made him nervous. Lot of wolves out there. How could he be sure Vince was legitimate? Vince leaned back, smiled that million-dollar smile, and said the words that would bury him. Look, Mr. Peterson, there are 2 types of people in this business. Those who see every client as a person, and those who see dollar signs. The elderly folks who don't know any better, who can't supervise the work properly. Those are easy targets for the dollar sign guys. But me? I see a veteran who served his country. For good people like you, I make sure everything's perfect. The others, the ones who don't pay attention, well, that's just business, right? I listened to that recording 5 times that night. Each time I heard something new. The contempt, the calculation, the casual cruelty of a man who'd found his niche and had no intention of leaving it. We had him. His own words, clear as day. But I wanted more than just to scare him off. I wanted complete victory. So we moved to phase 3, the conference room confrontation. I rented a conference room at a Columbus hotel. Professional space, long table, projector, the works. Then I sent Vince a letter from my law firm, actually just me and Mom's computer, requesting a meeting to discuss a settlement regarding multiple clients. Made it sound routine, like we just wanted to wrap this up quietly. Vince showed up with his lawyer, Mr. Smith. Cheap suit, cheaper cologne, and the kind of confidence that comes from intimidating people who can't fight back. They walked in like they owned the place. Vince was relaxed, almost bored. Smith was already talking about how these claims were baseless, how his client was a respected businessman, how we were wasting everyone's time. I let them talk, let them get comfortable. Then I started my presentation. First slide, Mom's house, the damaged roof, the ruined books, the canceled check. Vince shrugged, said there must have been a misunderstanding. These things happen in construction. Second slide, Mrs. Chen's basement, Mr. Rodriguez's garage, Mr. Henderson's deck. Smith started to object. So we couldn't just make accusations without proof. That's when the door opened, and walked Mrs. Chun, then Rodriguez, then Henderson with his cane, then the Williamses, then Gwynns. One by one, my army filed in. They didn't say anything, just sat down, stared at Vince. The room got very quiet. Smith's face went from confident to concerned. He started to stand, said this was some kind of ambush. They were leaving. I looked him straight in the eye and said the only thing that mattered. Mr. Smith, your client is here to discuss a generous settlement offer. If you walk out that door, the offer disappears, and this folder goes straight to the district attorney's office. Your choice. Smith looked at the folder, looked at Vince, looked at all the faces staring at him. His brain was doing the math. What would happen to his license if he was defending an obvious scammer? He sat back down. I continued the presentation. Financial records, photos, documentation. Then I played the recording. Dave's conversation with Vince. The whole thing. When we got to the part about elderly folks being easy targets, about it being just business, Mrs. Chen actually gasped. The room was dead silent. Smith's face had gone from concern to pale. He was sweating through his cheap suit. Vince wasn't relaxed anymore. He was trapped, and he knew it. I turned off the projector, laid out the terms. Simple, direct. Option B, we called the prosecutor. With this evidence, Vince would be looking at multiple counts of fraud. The story would hit the papers. His nice house in New Albany would go to legal fees. His reputation, what was left of it, would be destroyed. Option A, full restitution to every family. Every penny returned within 7 days, plus paying for independent assessments and complete repairs for all damaged properties, plus a written apology published in the Columbus Dispatch at his expense. 5 minutes to decide. Smith and Vince huddled in the corner, whispering furiously. I could see Smith gesturing at the door, shaking his head. Vince's face was red. He kept looking at all of us, probably calculating if he could somehow bluff his way out. For minutes, 3 minutes, 2. Finally, Smith came back to the table, said they would agree to the restitution, but needed time to arrange the funds. I told him they had until Monday morning, 9 a.m., 1 minute late, and option B was the only option. They left without another word. Vince couldn't even look at us. Smith practically dragged him out. The room erupted. Rodriguez was laughing and crying at the same time. Mrs. Chun was hugging everyone. Henderson just sat there, shaking his head, saying he couldn't believe it actually worked. But I knew Vince, knew his type. He wasn't done. Sunday night, my phone rang. Mom, frantic. Vince was at her door. I drove like a maniac, calling 911 on the way. But Mom, bless her heart, had already handled it. She'd had the presence of mind to start recording on her phone the moment she saw him through the peephole. Vince had shown up with flowers. Flowers, trying to charm his way out of it. When Mom wouldn't open the door, he'd gotten angry. Called her names I won't repeat. Said she'd regret this. Said he knew where she lived. Obviously. Said this wasn't over. All recorded. All evidence. Monday morning, Vince didn't show. Shocking, right? But we were ready. The folder went to the DA's office at 9:01 a.m. By noon, there was a warrant. By 3 p.m., Vince was in custody. The story broke on the local news that night. Local contractor arrested for defrauding elderly veterans. They interviewed Mom, Mrs. Chun Henderson. The segment went viral. Someone posted it on Reddit. Military Facebook groups picked it up. By Wednesday, it had 3 million views on YouTube. Thursday morning, my phone rang. Producer from a national morning show. They wanted to do a segment. Would we come to New York? All expenses paid. Mom had never been to New York. I said yes. The show was surreal. Mom charming the hosts, telling her story. They played the recording of Vince saying seniors were easy targets. The host actually teared up. They brought out all the families via satellite. Rodriguez wore his dress blues. Henderson saluted the camera. Twitter exploded. But here's where it gets amazing. After the show, we got a call from the CEO of a major home improvement chain. They wanted to create a fund, the General Daniels Building Battalion. They'd provide materials at cost for repairs to military families' homes. Local contractors would donate labor. They'd start with our 19 families, then expand nationwide. The first project was Mom's Roof. 15 volunteers showed up. Real contractors, not scammers. They had it done in 2 days. Perfect work. No charge. Vince got 18 months. Not enough, but something. He also got probation, restitution requirements, and his contractor's license permanently revoked. Last I heard, he was working at a car wash in Indiana. The Building Battalion has helped over 200 families now. They've got chapters in 12 states. Mom's on the board of directors. At 81, she's learning PowerPoint. She's terrible at it. It's adorable. I went back to The Hague eventually, back to prosecuting war criminals and crimes against humanity. But something was different. The work didn't feel hollow anymore, because I'd learned something important in Ohio. Justice isn't just about the big victories. It's not just about the international tribunals and the headlines. Sometimes it's about a son keeping a promise to his mother. Sometimes it's about neighbors standing together. Sometimes it's about making sure that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. Last week, I got a package from Mom. Inside was a photo from her new deck, the one the Building Battalion volunteers built. She's sitting at a table with Mrs. Chun, Henderson, Rodriguez, all of them. They're laughing about something. There's a potted geranium on the table, and Mom's handwritten note on the back says, "This time I picked the contractor myself." Dad would have loved this. Not the conflict, but the outcome. He always said the real victory wasn't in defeating your enemy. It was in making sure they could never hurt anyone again. But even more than that, it was in building something better in place of what was destroyed. Vince thought he was running a simple scam. He ended up starting a movement. He thought he was stealing from the vulnerable. He ended up creating an army of protectors. He thought it was just business. Turns out he was wrong about that too. Henderson was wrong about one thing. He said trust, once broken, never comes back. But Mom's roof doesn't leak anymore. Her books are safe. And somewhere in Columbus, there's a conference room where a con artist learned that evil counts on good people doing nothing. It counts on the system being too slow, too expensive, too complicated. But when those good people stand together, when they turn their pain into purpose, everything changes. The war for Mom's house is over. We won. But the war against those who prey on the vulnerable? Thanks to a bunch of angry seniors in Ohio, a mom who wouldn't give up, and a contractor who said the quiet part out loud, we're winning that one too. One roof at a time.